This is Saturn Girl. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. Comment below because I want to know what you think and it helps me out with the algorithm. And I need your help. We're making this a thing. You listen? You hear me? Subscribe. Okay. Anyway, this is another one of my transit videos. And just to give you a brief breakdown, with these transit videos, we'll first talk about an aspect in transit, and then also how it appears in someone's birth chart. From there, we're going to look at a few events that correlate with the transit, and then a few celebrities who also have that aspect in their birth chart, just to look at some examples of, how that expresses, right? And then, for you vultures, we do your horoscopes, right? At least for the bigger transits, right? Like this one. So what's happening? Well, on October 4th, Mercury, our mindful master of the mysteries, will enter the Venusian sign of Libra. He will remain there until October 21st. What does this mean for you, for me, for us? Well, let's take a look. First of all, let's look at the fun chart. I always forget to do this, But you see Mercury there at 15 degrees Virgo? Well, let's go forward. There he's moving so fast. And then we get to October 4th. And then he tips into the basket, right? He tips in. He's circling the basket, tips in at the buzzer. Bulls win. I don't know why I said the Bulls, but, who wasn't a Michael Jordan fan? Late 80s, early 90s. Anyway, so you see, right? What does this mean? Well, firstly, let's recall what Mercury means in astrology. So, firstly, I refer to Mercury as they because, they're sort of ambiguous and I consider them non-binary. They represent the processes of thinking, speaking, and expression. They also rule the written word and the occult, commerce, business, gambling, skill, being clever, and curiosity, news and media and information. Mercury is also clever, cunning, and can be deceptive. Well, what about Libra, right? Libra gets his meaning from several sources, right? Some of these you may be aware of if you follow me, right? So first of all, Libra's ruled by Venus, the planet of harmony, beauty, and relationships. He begins at the autumnal equinox. That's the place of equal night and equal day on the way to the winter solstice. So you see, he's at a cardinal point, and he's also a cardinal sign, which means he initiates or starts things. You see, each of the cardinal signs marks the beginning of a new season and a definite stage in the symbolic journey of the soul or consciousness from its source into the world and back to its source once again. Like, the Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, there and back again. That's the journey, at least in these traditions, the Hermetic tradition and a lot of Western occultism. So, you see, the cardinal signs are particularly powerful signs. He's also an air sign. I say he because, we'll get to that. But he's an air sign. You see, the air signs tend to be more cerebral, right? So you may notice a pattern here. The meaning of a sign primarily comes from the planet that rules them, its place in the solar cycle, its modality, its element, and its gender, right? So in terms of an air sign, the element They tend to be more cerebral, intellectual, but also relational, right? They know how to connect with people typically. Now, when it comes to gender, right? Libra's considered a masculine sign. In fact, all of the air and fire signs are considered masculine, aren't they? You see, but you can just as well say yin or yang. So in this case, we could say yang, which means active as opposed to passive energy. So, and you can see how each of these designations together paints a rich picture of Libra's meanings, right? What are some of those meanings, right, of Libra? Well, social awareness, right? Oftentimes people with Libra placements can walk into a room and just sense the temperature, right? And by that I mean they're acutely aware of people being annoyed or antagonistic or agitated. So you see, this is a source of a lot of the people pleasing that Libra types like me, I'm a Libra moon, right? This is like the people-pleasing nonsense that we engage in, or rather, the reason for it, because we get uncomfortable. And so we want other people to be comfortable because we're uncomfortable. So, I mean, it's still sort of selfish, you know. But a lot of Libra types do this. We're also typically very aware of manners and social conventions. Like, shh, we don't say that around here. Or, shh, we don't look. Don't look, you know, like, you see her over there? Don't look, you know. Fake smiles. Anyway, I hate fake smiles. Think of cotillion. Did you ever have to do cotillion? I didn't, thank goodness, but I had friends who did. And for those of you who don't know what cotillion is, it basically trains you how to exist in high society, or like how to go to dinner parties and stuff with rich people, you know. So anyway, you know, it's being aware of like, oh, that's the dinner fork. That's the salad fork. And not in a Virgo way, but in a very socially aware way, you know. So anyway, some other things I think of are beauty and artistry. Many of us with Libra placements are artists and or musicians. There's a sense of aesthetic, which is conventionally nice, conventionally nice and pleasurable. I'm sorry, my brain is mush. I'm a Taurus Mercury. Does anyone else have Mercury retrograde and is dyslexic? I don't know. Mention in the comments, because I have Mercury retrograde and I'm dyslexic. Anyway, so a sense of aesthetic, which is nice or pleasurable, but we can also be what? Incredibly superficial. I always say, as a Libra moon, there is no end to the depths of my shallowness. Anyway, diplomacy and relationships. I think of Neville Chamberlain, you know, the famous British Prime Minister, I believe, who was famous for appeasing Hitler, right? Just letting him do what he wants, hoping that he would just go away, which is very Libran, right? So now Neville Chamberlain wasn't a Libra sun, but he had this midheaven in Libra. So that's what we saw about him, right? What else do we see? Well, we see judgment and decisions. We see deliberation and choice. We also see wit, but also pleasurable and clever conversation. You know, but it can also be passive aggressive and make fun of you, right? Anyway, well, what about Mercury in Libra, right? Well, Mercury in Libra is very intelligent. It's a skilled communicator. You see, they're very aware of social politics, right? I think of the movie Clueless. In fact, Alicia Silverstone is a Libra, and her character Cher in the movie is very, very, very Libra, right? So anyway, it's like Clueless. It's like the cool kids sit over there, the nerds sit over there, and the skater stoners sit over there, and goth kids, whatever. So, it's very 90s, right? Or, I don't know. I grew up in the 90s and the 80s. So anyway, but you see here, there's also beauty in speech. There's the tendency to be poetic or lyrical, be persuasive and influential, and even have a wide vocabulary with myriad words that are quite descriptive of all sorts of different conditions. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my Libra behind right now. So anyway, well, what else could it be here? We'll see, like I said before, we'll see skilled musicians and writers, right? And there, Agatha Christie, I believe, was Mercury Libra, right? Anyway, well, how about fairness, right? Libras are renowned, especially Mercury in Libra, because it weighs causes and effects, right? It's like the mind. Mercury is like the mind. And then Libra is what it's working through, right? So again, fairness. See, Libras will be like, that's not right. That's not fair. Aquarians do that too, but with different motivation. So also fashion sense, right? This goes with this and that goes with that. Don't wear those boots with that. You never wear polka dots with solids, or I don't know. I'm just making shit up here. But you see what I'm saying? It's very aware of fashion faux pas. You know, saying stuff like, ew, that's so ratchet. Right? Anyway. Indecision, famous Mercury Libra trait, right? Mercury's thinking, Libra's indecision, indecisive. So, oh my God, I'm such a Libra. Should I make a decision? Or should I let you make it for me? I don't know. The other thing we have is passive aggression, as we talked about. So, Mercury in Libra has a hard time saying things that make it feel uncomfortable. It needs to drag itself by the scruff of the neck and force itself to say what needs to be said. Oftentimes, the fear of confrontation will lead to what? Lying and deception. Oftentimes, Libras aren't trying to cause trouble. They're just afraid of causing trouble, which causes more trouble. It's better to be direct and upfront, isn't it? And I'm saying this for myself as a Libra moon, as someone who's had to force herself to do it, right? Anyway, so what else do we have here? Well, you know, the lying reminds me of who? Politicians. Shrewd, cunning, and strategy. You know, I think of people talking behind your back, or saying one thing to your face and saying other things when you're not there. The worst is when it's self-deception, meaning we believe our own bullshit, which is terrible because we're abstracting ourselves more and more away from what is. And our goal in spirituality is trying to perceive things as they are, isn't it? So anyway, well, we'll also see people who are very polite, agreeable, charming, but sometimes also inauthenticity or superficiality, right? People who are masters of small talk. Well, how's the weather? Oh, it's lovely. I remember this one time in Cambridge when it was chilly like this, but just nice enough and the trees were beginning to... I don't know. Again, I'm making things up. But you see what I'm saying? Also, we see caring too much what other people think, right? So, you know, trying to keep up with the Kardashians. Pretense. People who try too hard to be cool, right? And trying too hard to be cool isn't cool. That's why when my daughter says, "You're not cool," I'm like, but that's cool, right? She just rolls her eyes at me. Well, let's look at some examples of famous people with Mercury and Libra and maybe get a sense of how this looks in someone's chart. We've got a ton of musicians, right? So number one, Beyonce, who I would think of as quite superficial, but she's also got a sense of fairness. And she's taken some remarkable political stands, including one that's very important to me. She's defended trans children and gender-affirming care. So God bless you, Beyonce. And one pattern we're going to see repeated in a few of these Mercury Libra types is that they start out as part of a group or a band or whatever, and then go solo, right? So, and that's what Beyonce did. She was part of Destiny's Child, right? And then went solo. So, I don't even remember any Destiny's Child songs. I don't know why. Anyway. I remember TLC, but not so much Destiny. I'm old. I'm 40. So anyway, you can all make fun of me. I'm a millennial, but you'll say, okay, boomer. So anyway, so what about Gwen Stefani? Also, talented singer and musician. And her Libra Mercury is retrograde, like my Taurus Mercury. And she was, I think just a few years ago, diagnosed with dyslexia, right? Just like me. You know, like I went to the gun range with some friends of mine, and you could see where I had a couple shell casings hit me. But the problem is I'm dyslexic, and so I brought my GNU to the gun range. Boom, boom. Because GNU is like, anyway, you get the joke. It's an anagram, anagrammatic, if that's a word. Anyway, so she's dyslexic like me. And she also started as part of a group and went solo, No Doubt, which was one of my favorite bands when I was a kid. I remember that song, I'm Just a Girl, came out when I was 13, and I was singing the out of it. I'm just a girl, just a little old me. Anyway, we'll move on. Doja Cat. Right? Doja Cat. When I think of Libra, I think of cannabis quite oftentimes. You know, I mean, I think of Taurus sometimes in relation to it too, but the Venusian signs. And guess where Doja Cat got her name? She named herself after cannabis. Yup. Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne, another Libra Mercury. And he's a pretty shrewd businessman, isn't he? He's had plenty of other ventures. I think he bought a sports agency. He does sports media. He's very into sports. And he's got his own brand of cannabis. All these Libran types with their cannabis. Right? Anyway. He was also part of a group too. The Hot Boys. Seems a bit presumptuous. And then he went solo too. And then I have A$AP Rocky, who I don't even know. A$AP Rocky, A$AP. I never heard of this character before, but he's quite famous. So he started as part of a group too, like a whole sort of collective. And then he also went solo. But the collective was sort of part of his musical identity. So he still was promoting that whole thing and people that he came up with. So quite interesting. That's very Libran, isn't it? And then John Mayer, who was famous when I was younger. Your body is a wonderland. Well, he is a brilliant musician. I'm a guitarist, and I can definitely give credit where credit is due. And he's definitely a brilliant guitarist. However, he apparently isn't a very nice human being. A bunch of ex-girlfriends have described him as toxic and manipulative, which is also very Mercury and Libra, isn't it? There's also Bruce Springsteen, brilliant musician with a sense of fairness, right? He was so disgusted with the Iraq War and the Bush administration that he actively campaigned for John Kerry in 2004, which really pissed off his conservative fans and caused a bit of controversy. Well, how about some actors? We have Hugh Jackman, more like Jack Human. I thought that was funny. It made me laugh when I was writing this. Anyway, you know, they should have put Wolverine in Les Mis. That would have been way more interesting. I've seen the... Well, you know, I dreamed the dream of time gone by. And then Wolverine comes in. Should I call you Logan Weapon X? No, Wolverine. Shing, shing. That's from Mallrats. Mallrats. Anyway, anyone see Mallrats? Snoochie Boochies. So, who else do we have as far as actors? We've got Sophia Loren, widely seen as one of the greatest actresses of all time and a sex symbol. I think I remember her from Grumpier Old Men. I think that was Sophia Loren, right? He's all... anyway, I'm not going to do that. We got to keep moving on. Will Smith, another Libran type. I mean, a slap. It's like a passive-aggressive punch. Come on now. Libras can't even fight well. I mean, they even do that half-assed, don't they? Jack Black. He wrote the best song in the world, didn't he? I mean, come on. Well, Sacha Baron Cohen, another interesting one. I mean, his whole career is based on tricking people into candid moments. Like, did you see the Rudy Giuliani one? I mean, Rudy looked like he was ready to get down. Like, it was a little much. Ooh, we have some politicians. Vladimir Putin. I mean, he's an extremely shrewd, clever, and calculating politician. You know, whatever we think about him, for good or for ill. You know, I'm not a fan, obviously. But still, he has that Libran shrewdness. Bernie Sanders, Libra Mercury as well, has an acute sense of fairness. In fact, is so committed to it that he spent his life working on behalf of workers' rights, right? And he's always on about, well, the 1%. We're the 99%. Large corporations, the taxes and Medicare for all, right? I mean, he's looking out for us. Well, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, as people like to say. I mean, she's very Libran. She says similar stuff to Bernie Sanders. I just wish she would do more of it, like Bernie Sanders does, rather than just, hey, wouldn't it be great if we taxed the rich? How about you actually tax the rich? How about we actually... Anyway, I'm not going to get into a whole... But this isn't a political channel. This is an astrological and spiritual channel. Philosophical. But we do talk about it. Current events, you know. Who's a couple other miscellaneous celebrities? Well, number one, Simon Cowell. I had to write that down because, I mean, he judges people's aesthetic for a living. Like, he's a, well, you sing great, but you don't look very good. Like, your hair, and you're too chubby. And he says all these sort of things, you know, judging people. But even more Libran is he got his best friend's wife pregnant. I can't think of anything more Libra. Anyway. So, well, what are some events that correlate with Mercury in Libra? We see fights for justice, don't we? Like in September of 1989, when Reverend Al Sharpton led a civil rights march through a neighborhood in Brooklyn where 40 white teens had unalived a black teen. You see? So this was a march for justice. Or that same month, Archbishop Desmond Tutu led the largest anti-apartheid march ever in South Africa. For those of you who remember the South African controversy with apartheid, we're not going to go into that here. But we also see justice served when a court ordered famous conspiracy theorist Alex Jones to pay millions of dollars in restitution to the families of the Sandy Hook shooting victims. We also see some incredibly superficial yet fun developments. For example, the debut of Baywatch in September of 1989. I mean, there were some interesting episodes and people were getting rescued and stuff, but it was incredibly superficial. I mean, how many times are they going to do the same thing? Like running the same... Look, here we go again. Anyway, excuse me. So, Well, how about historical agreements that we've seen? For example, the Oslo Accords in September of 1993, which brokered a peace, a Norwegian brokered peace, between Israel and Palestine. Didn't last very long. Well, how about taking sides? That's another thing we see. For example, the magazine Scientific American, which isn't known for having political leanings, made its first ever political endorsement in 175 years for backing Joe Biden for president in 2020. I mean, they're scientific, right? So it's probably climate change or something like that. But I mean, what happens when people start denying science? This also represents a shifting balance of power. An example of this is Queen Elizabeth II passing away last year, leaving us with King Charles, who's very famously unpopular. I mean, he's got the personality of a dead moth, as Don Rickles would say. So, for those of you who know Don Rickles, one of my heroes, he'd probably make a whole lot of fun of me, but I'd make a whole lot of fun of him too. So it would, it would work out. What else happened to balance or shift the balance of power? Progressive president Ignacio Lula da Silva narrowly defeated the far-right fasci Jair Bolsonaro in the Brazilian presidential election. This was big. A lot of us were watching this with keen interest because so much demolition and burning of the rainforest in Brazil has been causing worldwide trouble. So it threatens all of us. Now, finally, I just thought I should mention this because it's very Libran. Taylor Swift becomes the first artist in history to claim all top 10 spots on the Billboard's Hot 100 list, right? The top 100 chart. So Taylor Swift, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. First time in history. Good job, Taylor. Well, so what's this mean for you? Well, this could be a social time for you. You may find yourself mingling in gatherings or parties, meeting new people. Your conversational and relational skills will be in rare form. You may be extra eloquent or persuasive, so be careful with it. You may also seem a bit haughty, right? Or judgy. And be careful about self-censorship, because sometimes you do have to rock the boat and say what needs to be said. We may avoid uncomfortable situations. When avoiding it actually doesn't address the problem, right? Libra prefers resolutions to confrontations, but sometimes confrontations are what are needed to resolve problems. If you can't be direct and get shit out on the table, how can you address it properly, right? You may find yourself having to be diplomatic, on the other hand, or mediate between opposing sides. People with creative hobbies or jobs may find inspiration during this transit. I think I'm starting to, but we're not there yet, right? So, excuse me. But to really see more, we have to know what houses Mercury rules in your chart, which is determined by your rising sign. So, you fucking vultures, we're going to do your horoscopes. So let's dig into this because we're already 30 minutes in. So, okay. Well, let's go to Aries here. Oops. We've got Aries. Okay. Now, just pretend that Mercury's gone into Libra. Right, okay. So let's start off with Aries. So for Aries, this means Mercury enters the 7th house of partners and then rules the 3rd house of local area and the 6th house of obligations and enemies and illnesses, right? So you may find yourself having to compromise with a partner perhaps regarding daily chores or the regular work to be done. It could be around the house, but it could also be errands, right? Go to the store, get the gasoline, or, take the child to the vet, or, you know what I'm saying. One of your, either one of your or your partner's siblings could be interfering in your relationship, because the third house is also siblings. There could also be some sort of agreement between you and a neighbor or neighbors. Maybe it has to do with a neighborhood watch or an easement or a fence or a property line. Or maybe you're like, yeah, we'll cut this tree together, or this tree's on my property, but the leaves are falling on your property, and yada, yada, yada. You see what I'm saying? But also, you may have to be aware of a spouse or a sibling getting sick, right? Illnesses. Well, let's move on to Taurus. Taurus Rising. So for Taurus Rising, this means Mercury enters the 6th house of obligations, illnesses, enemies, and rules the 2nd house of money and the 5th house of pleasure and children. So you see, this is a time for getting organized, isn't it? Making lists, especially when it comes to your money and your kids. So now I know we don't have to balance our checkbooks anymore, but at least keeping track of our expenses, right? So maybe you're adapting your kids to a new schedule. Maybe they're in sports now or in camp. I don't know, school stuff. Or maybe you have to buy the equipment for sports or cheerleading. Cheer is so expensive. Oh my gosh. One of my buddy's daughters did cheer, and he was always like, oh my God. Anyway. So it will also feel very tedious trying to balance all these competing priorities in order to make sure you have time for fun, because the 5th house is also your pleasure, your fun, right? So scheduling in some fun time. It's so funny because, I think of myself as a social extrovert type, but then I just always want to be by myself on my time off. Leave me alone. Anyway. Well, what about our Gemini Rising friends? So this means Mercury enters the 5th house, right, of pleasure and kids, rules the 1st house of self, and the 4th house of father and origins. So, I forgot to fast forward to our Gemini friends. There's our Gemini friends. You see, I need to do that on the chart because it keeps me on track, right? So father and origins, you're probably going to be like a hostage negotiator with your kids, aren't you? If you have children, that is. You'll likely want or have to do something that they won't like. But you have to follow through and stick to your guns, because that's what good parents do. Children need consistency. Now, to me, this also represents the relationship between grandparents, 4th house, and grandchildren, 5th house. So maybe you notice a budding connection between your kids and your parents. If your parents have already passed, maybe your children start asking about them or asking about their heritage and genealogy. I don't know. The other side of this, though, could be about sports and competition. It's also a great time for small business people to strategize, take calculated risks or gambles, right? Because you have to with the small business. All right, that's our Gemini friends. What about our Cancer friends? So that means Mercury's entering your 4th house, right? And rules the 12th and the 3rd. So the 4th is parents, the 12th is isolation and mental health. The 3rd is siblings and your local community, right? So did a sibling move back in with your parents, perhaps? Maybe they're going to. Or maybe this causes a rift between you and your parents. Whatever it is likely that a sibling complicates your relationship with your parents. Or you have to come to some agreement about them or with your parents particularly. You see, Mercury going through the 4th house is like negotiating with your parents or with landlords or mortgage companies, right? So Um, on the other side of this, maybe someone is coming to stay with you, or you have a house guest you really don't want. You'll likely want to be left alone and probably be annoyed by what I call space invaders, right? They're invading my space. Well, what about our Leo Rising friends? I love Leo Rising, but just, I'm sort of mad at Leo Rising right now. It's hard for me to get over things. Like, I get over big stuff, I feel like, but not like, I mean, I guess breakups are big stuff, but this was a little breakup. It was a little breakup. I'd only seen this person for like a month, but, bitterness. I'm bitter like baker's chocolate. I'm as sweet as baker's chocolate. Anyway, Leo Rising. Mercury enters the 3rd house, doesn't it? The siblings and short trips house. But Mercury rules the 11th house, which is hopes and friends, and the 2nd house of money, right? So anyway, you may find yourself having to do business networking or building relationships to get clients or, to help your livelihood or a business venture, right? Perhaps you have to go to a conference or a trade show. I used to have to do that a lot when I was in a conventional job. Some meeting perhaps in your area, people in your industry or like-minded individuals. If you're in college or school, you could be having to do a group project or collaborative endeavor of some sort. It could be that siblings come to visit, or a sibling comes to visit, or perhaps you negotiate or come to a decision with them about something. You may also have to do public speaking or writing or marketing, or maybe you do content creation. You see, these are all things that can come out of the 3rd house. Excuse me. Well, what about our Virgo Rising friends? Virgo Rising. I love Virgo Rising. Well, Mercury enters the 2nd house, right, of money, rules the 10th house of life direction, and the 1st house of self. So Mercury rejoices in the 1st house, doesn't he? Or doesn't they? Don't they? I'll start over. Mercury rejoices in the 1st house, don't they? Right? Oh. Am I looking at the wrong place? Virgo Rising. Mercury enters the 2nd house of money, rules the 10th house of life direction, and the 1st house of self. I lost my place. I'm sorry. I need a teleprompter, not just these notes, right? So anyway, right? Mercury in the 2nd house. It's like Snoop Dogg. I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind, right? Laid back. So, you see what I'm saying? You got your mind on your money and your money on your mind. You may be reconsidering the path you've chosen in life. Maybe you're dissatisfied with your job or life direction, and you're looking for a change. You may be looking for new revenue streams, or have to make strategic expenses, like investing in your business, or new equipment, or, like for me, I need a new camera, or I need new software or something, right? So now, depending on the venture, you may be the equipment, if you see what I'm saying. I mean, there are certain ventures that I do where I am the equipment. Investing in yourself because it's the 1st house, right? Investing in yourself as part of your business. So now the other part of this, though. Oh, you know what, though? We're going on to Libra. I was reading too far into the next one. We're going to Libra Rising, friends, now. I'm such a mess. I really am a mess. I'm a hot mess, though. At least I think so. And that's what matters. I mean, I'm just trying to get in my own pants, I guess. So, now Mercury, for Libra Rising friends, Mercury enters the 1st house of self, rules the 9th house of your beliefs and long journeys, as well as the 12th house of isolation and mental health. And so, like I was saying earlier, Mercury rejoices in the first house because Mercury is the mind and the first house is you. And like Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum, right? In Latin. So you'll be very keen and perceptive, but you'll have a difficult time making decisions. So rather than being a social time like it should be for you, you'll probably want solitude. Perhaps to contemplate what you believe and why. Maybe an alternative view changed your own, or made you question your own. It's sort of like an internal dialogue with yourself about your worldview and why you have it. You also may be addressing a mental health issue that occurred, probably last month while Mercury was in Virgo. Now let's fast forward to our Scorpio Rising friends. So for Scorpio Rising, this puts Mercury going into your 12th house of isolation and mental health, ruling the 8th house of debt and death, other people's stuff, and the 11th house of hopes, wishes, and friends. So it could be likely that you have a mental health issue arise that needs to be addressed. Or maybe it's a friend of yours who does. You may need the support of friends, or they may end up needing your support during a crisis. So you might see yourself get pulled into that. One of you, either you or your friend, may be dealing with trauma. Probably from a death, right? Because it's the 8th house here. Or a loss of some sort. Something also may have been stolen from you, or you may have had some other kind of financial loss. Either way, you'll probably want to be left alone and you won't be looking for company. What about our Sagittarius Rising friends? Well, so for Sagittarius Rising, this means Mercury enters the 11th house, right? Hopes and friends, rules the 7th house of partners, and the 10th house of life direction, career, You may be having to balance your relationship with your friends and your relationship with your partner, right? So it's like negotiating with both of them to come to a healthy compromise about how to spend your time, right? Maybe you're the type of person who, likes to go out with the girls or whatever, and he gets jealous. I don't know. Or the other way around. Just guesses here. Excuse me. Alternatively, you could find yourself getting some help on a new venture. It could be a new business venture, a new project, and from friends or like-minded people. You could also get into a new hobby or a group, maybe with your partner. Like maybe you and a partner decide to take cooking classes, or maybe you decide to go to the gun range together, take shooting classes, something that I enjoy. But finding a common hobby, to foster the couple's life, to build your relationship. It's important to do some things together and some things apart. So now you could also get new opportunities or connections. So you could get new opportunities through connections or networking, like job referrals through a friend or someone you meet. The 11th house isn't just friends, it's people in general who help us, like benefactors and well-wishers. It's like the Medici family, right? So, how about our Capricorn Rising friends? So for Capricorn Rising, this means Mercury enters the 10th house of life direction. You see, all 4 cardinal signs are square. It's Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer. So they're going to either be square or opposite. So you could tell, right, that signs are square when they're in the same modality, right? The same modality makes them square. So Capricorn Rising, right? the 6th house of obligations, and the 9th house of beliefs and long journeys. So you could find yourself traveling for work, maybe out of state, maybe international. Perhaps you work at a university, which is also 9th house. Or you're involved in an academic endeavor of some sort, 9th house. Do spirituality or politics factor into your job? Because that would be a thing. You could also find yourself being more subservient, 6th house, at work. Perhaps the boss is trying to give you more responsibilities, and you have to negotiate with them to keep it fair and reasonable. Excuse me. You may be in management and have employees of your own. One of them may have a particular incident and need some extra attention, or you find that you need to work with them and promote them, or promote their interests in some way. Excuse me. Well, how about Aqua Rising? Aqua Rising, friends. This is me, Aqua Rising. So you see, Mercury's entering our 9th house of beliefs and journeys, rules the 5th house of kids and pleasure, and the 8th house of death and debt, right? So, well, this is me, like I said. We're likely going to be entertaining alternative points of view pretty soon here. You see, we grasp ideas with our minds, don't we? And we tried to hold on to them firmly. You know, it's mind grasping, idea perception. We define and identify ourselves by what we believe. So you see, this transit for us Aqua Risings is about loosening our grip and taking a more practical approach to what we believe, rather than being ideological or dogmatic, right? Which I can be, totally, you know. So working on being more flexible in your mind in terms of belief, because the world is flexible, it's interdependent. Now, this new inquiry of ours could be initiated or sparked by our children. Something they or we are excited about. Or it could be our own contemplation of mortality and death, right? That often changes our beliefs, doesn't it? Because when you feel stuff getting real, I mean, shit gets real, doesn't it? So, now this, like I said, could also be stimulated by a sense of loss. Whether it's a loss in faith, a loss of spiritual community, or a sense of, like I said, of passing away. Or it could just be a pleasurable trip. But let's move on to our Pisces Rising friends. Oops, too far. So Pisces Rising, this means Mercury enters the 8th house, right, of death and debt, and rules the 4th house of home and parents, and the 7th house of partners, right? So Mercury in the 8th house often brings criminal activity, doesn't it? So keep your nose clean. It could be drugs, it could be theft, or it could be, right, SA. You know what word I'm saying, right? Assault. Anyway. It could be childhood trauma involving a parent that you suddenly find yourself facing or processing. You may be focused on finances because it's the 8th house. There could be a loss of money related to a spouse or ex. You know, maybe you had to pay them alimony? I don't know. You may have accumulated some debt and find yourself having to start paying it off, or reorganizing or restructuring your debt. Either way, this transit indicates a need to budget yourself, right? And to plan out your expenses. Alternatively, this could involve money you owe on a house, past due rent on an apartment, because it's 4th house, or maybe money you borrowed from a parent or partner. So, it's quite interesting stuff. Now, I hope this was useful. I hope you use these horoscopes and they have some meaning for you. Now, What really matters, though, is that you like and subscribe, comment, and share my shit, because I need all the help I can get. The other interesting thing is I do wonderful videos, and you should go back and watch the rest of them. Like them, subscribe, and they're very informational. I do educational content, and I'm a little funny too, you know. So there's that. And I do the best readings in the world. It's scientifically proven. There have been studies, right? Stephen Hawking, if he were still alive, he would attest to that. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But anyway, all my contact information is in the description. So please, if you want a reading, email me. Now, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a spectacular whatever it is you're having.